Today we will be configuring OpenLDAP. Just kidding guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be configuring OpenLDAP on a Docker instance that's actually running on a Raspberry Pi. Now this will work for any sort of Docker instance, it doesn't have to be on a Raspberry Pi, but we're going to be installing that in just a few easy minutes, and I'm going to break it down dummy style so that it's easy for an idiot like myself to follow. Now if I got you with that accent, make sure you leave a like down below. Now this video goes out to the real heroes, those MVPs who do have that thick accent, that have explained so many complex topics to me when no one else on YouTube could. Luckily for you, I don't have an accent, but I'm still going to help you install OpenLDAP on a Docker instance and get you up and running in no time. In this video, we're going to be installing Bitnami's OpenLDAP instance on a container. We're going to then make sure that that container is running and that the initial OpenLDAP configs were accepted. I'm going to show you how to do basic account maintenance like creating additional accounts and hashing passwords. I'm going to show you an example of creating new OUs and groups once your instance is up and running. And I'm even going to show you how to connect an external service like Portainer to OpenLDAP so that Portainer or any other instance that you might be using can actually connect to your OpenLDAP and use the accounts that you've created inside of OpenLDAP. Don't worry, this is going to be super easy and it's only going to take you a few minutes. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. Alrighty, so the first thing you're going to need to do is actually connect to the device that's running Docker. In this case, it's a Raspberry Pi for me, so I'm going to go ahead and SSH into that. So let's go ahead and do that. But before we get into that, make sure you guys like, comment, share, and subscribe if I was able to help you in this video. When I hit 100 subs, I'm going to be giving away an orange pie to one lucky individual, so make sure you stick around for that. But anyways, back to the video. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my desktop, and I'm going to open up PowerShell so I can SSH over to my Docker instance. You can use whatever tool you want to SSH. Run the following command, SSH root. I'm logging in with root at the IP address of my Docker device. And now we're gonna have to run a series of commands. I actually have some notes that I'm gonna be following that I've taken as I've gone through and reinstalled OpenLDAP a few times. And I'll make sure I leave these in the comments below. This is gonna be the first one and it's pretty big, but don't worry, I'll break it down. So basically we're just saying that the host name is OpenLDAP 5, so that's gonna be the actual host name on the container. And then this is the actual container name, OpenLDAP 5. And then network, I'm selecting bridge because I needed to have internet access because I'm going to install Nano later on, so you might want to do the same. And then here we actually have the domain name essentially, so mine's going to be test5.com, but you can switch yours to whatever you want obviously. And you might want to switch to local if you don't actually have a domain name. One thing I would note is that you're going to want to pay attention to how long your domain name is, because I noticed when I tried using TechLogic Lounge, it was too long and it actually shortened it down to TechLogic. So you might want to make sure that you don't have it too long, or at least you break them out. So DC test 5, and you might want to do something like DC equals test 2, whatever, just so that you break it up and you don't meet those character limits. Then we're going to specify the LDAP admin account, so the account that's actually going to be able to modify LDAP. We're specifying his entire distinguished name, and we're creating 2 additional custom users. We're not allowing anonymous binding, and then we're actually specifying the user OU and group OU, and then we're actually specifying the volume on the host. So in this case, there's going to be a volume created on my Docker host called this, and it's going to be mapped to this on the container. And then we're specifying the port that we're mapping the container to. So essentially the host is going to be allowing 1389 to be mapped to the container port 1389 on the actual OpenLDAP container. And then we're specifying the actual version that we're using. We're just going to pull the latest. So let's go ahead and run that. And it should be good to go now. We can verify that it's running using a Docker PS. And we can see here that it is actually running. And it is mapped to port 1389 and 1636 on the host. So by default, OpenLDAP doesn't have any text editor software on it, so you're going to want to install Nano so that you can configure the LDAP files, which you're going to see later on. Let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to actually go over here, and we're going to map ourselves into the container, and we're going to log in as root, and you're going to obviously specify the container name here. So mine's going to be OpenLDAP 5. And we're going to go ahead and get into the bin/bash, which is essentially going to open a terminal for us. And now we're actually inside of the container. And then from here, we're going to do an apt-get update. And we're pulling down all the current updates. And then we're going to run an apt-get install Nano. And now we have Nano installed. We can verify that it's actually there by typing Nano. And it should put us into here, so that's great. You're going to need that. So now we're going to verify that the slapd service is actually running, which is the service that OpenLDAP uses. So we'll do ps aux, and then we'll do grep, which is essentially we're going to be looking for the service titled slapd. And as long as you have something pop up, you're good. Now, if you don't, you're going to need to start the service. It should start automatically, but if it didn't, you'll just run this. OpenLDAP and run. So essentially we're just going into the folder that has the actual OpenLDAP run script and we're running it. And then you can rerun that command just to make sure the service is actually running. All right, so now we need to verify that our OpenLDAP configuration that was specified when we actually deployed this image were actually accepted. So we're actually going to go ahead and go over here and we're going to run a cat command, which is essentially going to display the output of a file. And we're going to display it on this file here, this mdb.ldif file, and this should be your path to it. If not, and the numbering is slightly off here, like this OLC database 2, it might be 3 or 0, but you can actually just cd into this path here, this config folder, and then you actually be able to identify which file, what the numbering is for this file here. But it's probably going to be the same. I've redeployed this a whole bunch of times and it always ends up being the same. And this is going to display your actual config. So we can see here my test5.com was actually accepted and my LDAP admin is here. Now you can also see the password, but it is hashed, so you're not going to be able to identify that, and we can change that later on if we'd like to. But it looks like we're good here. As long as yours matches up to what you set, you're good to go. So now we want to go ahead and verify that that custom user we created earlier was actually created. So we'll go ahead and modify this command over here. We're going to be using LDAPSearch, and we're going to specify X, specifying that LDAP actually requires authentication when you run a command on it. And we're going to specify the host. And we're actually going to specify the account that we're using. In this case, you need to use the entire distinguished name for the LDAP account name. So mine's admin1 at, it's not TechLogic, it is test5.com. And then we're going to be looking in this base domain here. So it's not going to be TechLogic Lounge, it's going to be test5.com. Obviously yours would be whatever yours is. And we're going to be looking sub, so under the domain. So anything under test5.com that you've created or whatever it is for you, an object class. So essentially we're looking for a specific attribute for an object. We're going to specify star, which means anything. And we're going to have to update this IP as well. So we can actually get the IP of the LDAP container by opening up another PowerShell. We'll just right click and open it and then SSH back over again. And then the command we need to run is docker network inspect. And then you're going to specify the actual Docker network that you're using. In this case, I'm using Bridge. And then you're going to look for the entry for that LDAP container that you have. So this is the actual IP for it. We'll copy that, close that, and then we'll replace this IP here. And we should be good to go. So let's go ahead and give this a run. Now you need to actually enter the password for the LDAP admin that you created earlier. And this is going to show you what you do have. So we've got our actual domain here, test5.com, and we're going to go ahead and scroll down, and we do see that custom user was created. That's his actual surname, username, and then we actually have init organization person. That's essentially saying that this is an account and this is his hash password. And if this guy was part of any other groups, we'd actually be seeing those groups listed below as well, but he's not currently. We'll go ahead and do that in a second, but I want to show you a few additional commands as well to navigate through LDAP if you need to. So if you want to see the specifics of just one user specifically, you can actually run this command over here, and the formatting for it's going to be similar to the LDAPSearch command we used earlier to see everything. So we're going to need to update that IP. Update this as well. All right, so similar command, except for this time we're specifying that we're looking for a specific user ID, in this case custom user 1. And if you have any issues running any of these commands, make sure you're not misplacing these quotations. They're crucial. You're going to need them, and you'll see there throughout this entire command. You're probably going to want to put a lot of this on text notes or something so that you have it, because you're going to be running it continuously. So we'll go ahead and run this command. Copy. Enter my password, and we can see the specifics for just that user right here. All right, so let's say you want to change the password on the user. Well, that's pretty easy to do as well. You can run this command here, LDAP password, and the formatting is going to be similar to the LDAPSearch command. X for authentication, saying that we need to authenticate. H for the host, identifying the actual host. Make sure you have the correct IP of your LDAP. D, specifying
these nuts. Got it!
The actual LDAP admin account that we're going to use to look for this, or to change this password. And then W to prompt for that password. And then we're actually going to specify the actual user account that we want to change the password for. So CN equals custom user 1. He's in the OU users and test5.com. So we'll copy this command. and we'll paste it over here. And you're going to enter the new password for that account. I'm just going to do 1234. You're going to confirm it. And then now you're going to enter the password for the LDAP admin that can actually make this change. That's it. It's changed. So now we're going to actually get into adding and modifying the LDAP database, and these are all going to be requiring LDIF files essentially, which is why we installed Nano earlier. But before we do that, I'm going to show you how to hash a password, because this is going to be something that you want to use when you're creating these LDIF files, just so you're not entering the password in plain text for a user that you're creating. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and just run this password here. So slap password D, tac S, and then you're going to enter the password that is the plain text password that you actually want to use for your account. So in this case, I'll run this, and then I'm just going to specify 1234, and then it's going to spit out the hash. And this is going to be something that you're going to want to copy for your LDIF file later. But now let's actually get into modifying these LDIF files and creating additional objects in your LDAP. All right, so if you want to add or modify entries in your LDAP, like you want to add new users, groups, or OUs, you're going to have an LDIF file. And in order to do that, you're going to have to actually create that LDIF file. So now we're going to run the touch command, which is going to create the text file that we need, which is going to be a .ldif file. So touch, and I'll just name this file add items, because I'm going to add a few things to it. _items.ldif, and then we should be able to run a ls tac-al and actually see that file here. So now we need to actually edit it so that we can put the configuration in it that we want. So Nano add items, and this is going to put us in the text editor. Now if you're pretty familiar with Linux, this is probably easy for you, but don't worry, just think of it as like TextPad if anything, if you're not. So now we're going to go ahead and add a few items to our LDAP. Specifically, we're going to add an OU, we're going to add a group, and we're going to add a user as well. Pay no attention to the fact that some of the text changed. I had some issues, so I had to re-record some stuff, but nothing big. All of your notes are going to be good to go in the description down below. But anyways, so this example here, we're going to go ahead and create an organizational unit called groups, which is actually something we tried doing when we deployed this, but I noticed it wasn't actually configured for some reason, so we're going to go ahead and do it now. And then we're actually going to go ahead and create a user called Portainer bind, and that is going to be the account that I use to bind to OpenLDAP, essentially to connect to OpenLDAP when I try to log in on my Portainer Docker container that you'll see later on. You're going to see it's got a few attributes just specifying that it is a user. And it's also going to have its UID, which is the user ID for the account, as well as that password that we generated earlier. The hash for, it's just 12345. Then we're going to go ahead and also create the bind accounts group, which is going to be here. And then we're going to actually add that Portainer account to it. Let's go ahead and copy all this over. And go ahead and obviously change this up as you need. If you want additional OUs or groups or accounts, go ahead and just do that. And I'm going to press Control X and yes to save, and I'm just going to press enter because I don't need to change the name of the file. Then we're going to go ahead and actually run this LDAP add command so we can add these entries. So LDAP add, of course the convention is about the same as the LDAP search and modify commands that you'll see. Enter our LDAP admin password, and we got them all added. And now we're actually going to go ahead and run that LDAP search command we ran earlier just to see the new entries. And we can see that we now have an OU called groups. We have a Portainer bind account, and we also have a bind account group, which the Portainer account is added to. Now let's say we want to actually go ahead and add an additional user to a group that's already pre-existing. Well, then we'll have to use the LDAPModify command. And to do that, we'll go ahead and create another LDIF file. You can use the same one if you want, but you might as well just have a few templates. So touch group mod. That's just what I'm going to name it, groupmod.ldif. And then we're going to open that. Now we're going to use this example down here to add a user to the group. Essentially, we're modifying this group here, which is the bind account group, and we're adding a member. You can obviously put delete, remove an account as well. And this is the account we're adding, that custom user account that we created when we initially deployed this. I'll go ahead and press Control X, yes, and enter. And obviously pause as you need to. I know I'm moving a little bit faster since I already have all my commands set up. And then we're gonna go ahead and run the LDAPModify command here. And then we'll enter my LDAP admin password. And now we modified it and added that user to the group. And we can actually check that out if we want to. We'll run that LDAPSearch command again. except for we're going to switch this to object class group of names. And now we can see that we do have our bind account group here, and we have two members, the Portainer and the custom user from before. So let's say I want to go ahead and delete that Portainer bind account that we created earlier. So I'm actually going to use this command over here, except for I'm going to switch out the member. I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to this Portainer there. So we're doing delete, same formatting as the LDAP and search commands. We're using this account, and we're going to go ahead and try and delete this user here. Paste it. Bam, he's gone. And if we do an LDAPSearch command again, if we switch the object class to init org person, which is what this guy would fall under, we're going to see that that mofo is gone. So that's how you would delete an object as well. All right, so now that we've done all that, let's go ahead and actually connect another service to use OpenLDAP as an authentication method. In this case, I'm going to use Portainer. If you don't know what Portainer is, it's essentially a graphical user interface container that you can use to manage Docker. And I actually deployed this in a previous video. You can check that out up here if you'd like. And it's going to be similar for other services as well, depending on what you're trying to deploy. A lot of the fields are generally kind of the same. So incognito window, pull that up. Hit enter. All right, so for me, I'm gonna go ahead and navigate to settings and then authentication, and I'm gonna select LDAP. And I was gonna use the Portainer bind account that I created earlier, but I forgot I just deleted it. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and just update these settings. So this is my old IP for my LDAP. I'm gonna switch that over to the new one. I'll come here, switch this over. I'm connecting to my OpenLDAP IP. Obviously yours is gonna be different on port 1389. And then the account that I'm going to use is I'll use the custom user one for now. So now you could use the actual LDAP admin user, but I wouldn't recommend that. I recommend creating an account dedicated for it. So I'm going to use this custom user one here, and this is going to switch over to OU equals users, and then DC equals test5.com, and then enter the password for that account, and then we're going to test connectivity. And you can see here I got a successful connection. So this account was actually able to reach out and bind and actually see the different users and read the LDAP structure. So now I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to specify what the base DN is. Mine's going to be test5, DC equals test5, DC equals com. Yours is obviously going to be different. If you're test2.local, it'll be DC test2, DC local, and then user attribute. So in order to identify the username, you're looking for the UID attribute within the actual account. And you can actually see that over here. If you go back to this, we can actually run that LDAPSearch command again. So it's essentially going to be looking for this UID here to identify an account's username. And then they're looking for this type of object class. This is essentially saying that if the object you're looking at has this attribute, object class, init or person, it is a user account. And you can switch this to whatever you'd like. Obviously, it's going to depend on what you decide to go with. And then for group searches, we're actually going to do the same thing. It'll be DC test5, DC com. And then specifically, we're looking for specific members in a group. So we're going to be looking for the attribute of member of. And that's essentially saying that we're going to be looking at a user account and we're looking to see if it's a member of whatever group we decide to specify later on. And for group filters, to identify if an object is a group, it should have this attribute group of names, which we've seen earlier, and that's about it. So I'll save my settings, go ahead and open up another browser and see if we can actually authenticate Portainer. So now I'm going to try logging in with that custom user account, and bam, I was able to log in using LDAP. And if you actually want to look at the logs to see whether or not this is actually seeing that, you can actually go back to your Docker host, and actually you're going to have to open up another PowerShell window. I'm actually already connected to it over here, so I'm already SSH into my Docker host. However, I'm not in the actual Docker container for OpenLDAP. I'm just in the main host. I can do Docker logs, and then I specify the container that I want to look at. In this case, it's going to be OpenLDAP 5, and we can see here that we were able to bind. Essentially, we reached out looking for a specific user. In this case, we reached out from Portainer, which is its IP right here, and we were looking for to identify whether or not custom user was an actual account, and we were able to successfully do so and accept it and closed out. Anyways, that's it. We're finally done configuring OpenLDAP. Now there's many other things you can actually go through. I'll leave a link to the Bitnami OpenLDAP documentation so that you can check that out and see what else you can customize. And you can actually set this up to where it uses port 1636 primarily, which will encrypt all of the traffic between your OpenLDAP communications, but you can definitely check that out.